Welcome to RTV Global Network. I'm Liam, and I'm Chloe.
Hey, everyone.
So today is August 7th, 2026, and we have a frankly overwhelming stack of reporting to get through for this deep dive.
Yeah, massive stack today.
Right. And our mission here is to really distill all of this down. We want to show you the essential mechanisms driving the world right now.
Because it's a lot. I mean, we're looking at everything from the structural integrity of our local constitutional framework to, this multi-facility crisis happening in the prison system.
And then you've got the macroeconomics of legacy apparel companies winding up and literally the geopolitical shockwaves of wayward space debris.
Yeah, space debris. It's a vast diagnostic landscape today.
It really is.
But our goal for you is to look past those isolated headlines. We want to map out the connective tissue. Like, how does a diplomatic threat in the Gulf states mechanically alter the price of the cooking gas in your kitchen?
Right, exactly.
Or how do these shifting legal frameworks around, say, judicial retirement ages mirror the battles happening inside international sports governance?
Right. The world basically operates on these incredibly complex systems. And today, we're going to unpack the gears inside those systems so you can actually navigate them.
Exactly.
So let's just jump straight into probably the deepest fracture point we're seeing today, which is the state's foundational infrastructure for law and order.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Because to understand where a society is headed, you have to look at the institutions that maintain its boundaries.
Right, the guardrails.
Exactly. And right now, those boundaries are just buckling under immense physical and administrative pressure. And it's starting at the very bottom, in the prisons.
Yeah, we are looking at a cascading series of unrest here across multiple facilities. This isn't just, a typical localized incident.
No, not at all.
The term cascading is actually mathematically accurate here. There was a highly violent clash at the Kuruwita prison.
Right.
And that resulted in 2 inmates dead and 2 others severely injured.
Which is tragic on its own.
It is. But then, right on the heels of that, close to midnight yesterday, a separate and just incredibly tense situation erupted at the New Magazine prison in Barela.
Wow.
Yeah, leaving 11 inmates injured. And that obviously triggered this massive system-wide tightening of security.
Right, and the print headlines this morning are expanding that map even further.
Yeah, they really are.
There's reporting on broader unrest at Mahara Prison, too, plus this incredibly sensitive situation emerging from a clash at the Negombo prison.
Yeah, that one is intense.
I mean, the evidence provided by a jailer there is apparently so volatile that the magistrate explicitly requested the media not to report the granular details.
Right, which tells you how serious it is.
Exactly. So I have to ask, when 4 separate major facilities fracture simultaneously like this, what's the underlying mechanism? Is this coordinated or is it just spontaneous combustion?
It's almost certainly the latter. It's spontaneous combustion driven by systemic pressure.
Like a pressure cooker.
Exactly like a pressure cooker. I mean, prisons operate as closed thermodynamic systems. When you exceed the physical and psychological capacity of that system, friction generates heat.
Right. There's nowhere for the pressure to go.
Exactly. The root causes here are, chronic overcrowding, delayed judicial processing, keeping remand prisoners in limbo for years, and just severe resource allocation deficits.
Wow.
Yeah. When the guard-to-inmate ratio collapses beyond a certain mathematical threshold, the administration basically loses informal control of the cell blocks.
So the inmates just take over.
Well, the inmates establish their own internal hierarchies to maintain order. Yeah. And when those gang or factional hierarchies collide, usually over contraband or territory, you get the fatal violence we saw at Kuruwita.
But once one facility erupts, how does that spark jump to another geographically distinct prison like New Magazine?
That's about information flow and administrative strain.
Yeah.
Even though they're isolated, inmates have illicit communication networks. When a riot happens at Kuruwita, word travels.
Oh, for sure.
But more importantly, when a riot happens, the Central Prison Administration has to divert their tactical resources, their lockdown protocols, and all their attention to that one hot spot.
Leaving everywhere else vulnerable.
Exactly. It leaves the rest of the network operating on a skeleton crew of attention, and that creates a window of vulnerability that other factions can exploit.
So the system is essentially cannibalizing its own security resources just to put out immediate fires.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening.
Now contrast that chaotic reality with what's happening at the executive level today. President Kumara Dissanayake just issued urgent orders to completely overhaul, expedite, and modernize the Sri Lanka police.
Right.
And interestingly, he's tying this police modernization directly to a massive unified drug rehabilitation push.
Yeah, and the linkage there is the crucial part of the policy.
How so?
Well, for decades, the default mechanism for dealing with narcotics has been strictly punitive, right?
Yeah.
Arrest the user, put them in the prison system, move on.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Right. But the president's push acknowledges the mathematical failure of that mechanism. If you keep using prisons as warehouses for addiction, you just guarantee the overcrowding that leads directly to the violence at Mahara and Kuruwita.
I mean, I understand the theory, but I'm looking at the timeline here. If the prisons are literally burning today, and the president is simultaneously pushing for this long-term drug rehab overhaul, it feels like a massive mismatch in pacing.
It's a huge delta, yeah.
Like you're trying to install a next-generation operating system onto a hard drive that's currently on fire. How do you shift a deeply entrenched, punitive police culture into a rehabilitative model while the institutions they feed into are actively collapsing?
That is the multi-billion rupee question right there.
Right.
It's an incredibly difficult transition because you're fighting institutional inertia. Historically, the police force's key performance indicators have been based on arrest numbers and drug seizures.
Not rehabilitation rates.
Exactly. Not successful rehab rates. So to change that, you basically have to rewrite the training manuals, alter the promotion criteria, and physically build the rehabilitation infrastructure.
Which takes years. And money.
Years and massive capital. So in the interim, you have this highly dangerous period where the old punitive system is failing, but the new rehabilitative system doesn't fully exist yet.
That makes a lot of sense. And, that institutional friction isn't just happening at the ground level with beat cops and inmates.
No, it goes all the way up.
It's happening at the absolute apex of the law enforcement and judicial systems. Let's look at the leadership controversies today.
Yeah, the Easter Sunday lawsuit.
Right, the 2019 Easter Sunday attacks civil lawsuit. The Colombo District Court just permitted former Defense Secretary Hemasiri Fernando and former Inspector General of Police Pujith Jayasundara to be completely removed as defendants from the lawsuit.
This is a textbook example of how complex the mechanism of legal liability actually is.
Yeah, walk us through it.
So, just to give you the necessary context, this civil suit was filed by an attorney-at-law who unfortunately suffered injuries in the Shangri-La hotel bombing.
Right.
Both Fernando and Jayasundara were at the absolute pinnacle of the national security apparatus when the attacks occurred. They've already navigated this whole labyrinth of legal jeopardy regarding criminal negligence.
And previous death sentence verdicts in their careers, right?
Exactly. And now, this specific ruling removes them from this particular avenue of civil financial liability.
Which fundamentally alters the scope of the lawsuit.
Yeah.
I mean, if you remove the top two national security figures from the equation, you're narrowing the funnel of accountability.
You really are.
And the public commentary today is heavily focused on whether the victims will ever see a conclusive allocation of responsibility that actually matches the scale of the tragedy.
And we are reporting this completely impartially, but the structural challenge is that the legal system demands a very specific standard of proximate cause.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning you have to prove that a specific failure by an individual directly resulted in the injury. And that is notoriously difficult to prove in massive systemic intelligence failures.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But the friction involving the Inspector General of Police isn't just historical, it's actively burning right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Public Security Minister Ananda Wijapala has gone on record accusing the SLPP, specifically its General Secretary Sagara, of deliberately undermining the country's investigative and judicial processes.
Yeah, let's break down the mechanics of this clash because it is intense.
It really is. The minister is basically framing any political threats or pressure directed at the current IGP as an existential threat to the rule of law.
Right. And it's escalated past just rhetoric. The Colombo Central Crimes Investigation Division is now officially probing Sagara's comments.
Wow. So you literally have the legislative political wing colliding head-on with the investigative apparatus.
Exactly. And again, observing this impartially, just looking purely at the structural conflict, what you're seeing is a stress test of institutional independence. The police force is theoretically meant to operate completely insulated from political convenience. But when political figures critique or try to steer investigative priorities,
And then the state security apparatus responds by investigating those political figures.
you enter this wild constitutional feedback loop. It begs the question, Who oversees the overseers?
And that constitutional feedback loop is currently paralyzing the judiciary as well. We're seeing this massive, highly polarized debate over a proposed constitutional amendment.
Yeah, the one regarding the retirement age of Superior Court judges.
Exactly. Which is one of the most critical structural stories of the day.
Because the retirement age of a Superior Court judge isn't just, like, a human resources issue. It dictates the composition of the bench for years into the future.
Right. It changes who will be presiding over upcoming, potentially history-making constitutional cases, which is why the opposition is literally in the streets. You've got heavy protests, demands for a national referendum to decide the issue. The Bar Association of Sri Lanka, the BASL, is urgently seeking a direct meeting with the president.
Yeah.
And yet, the relevant minister has explicitly stated that this amendment is going to be implemented regardless of the pushback.
And the timing of this local friction is just incredible when you look at what's happening internationally today.
Seychelles story.
Yes. A Sri Lankan justice is currently wrapping up his tenure and bidding farewell to the Seychelles judiciary. And in his official parting statement, he delivered this really stark warning.
What did he say?
He basically said that for any political entity to interfere with judicial decision-making and for any judge to yield to that interference sounds the absolute death knell for the judiciary.
Wow. The juxtaposition is almost cinematic.
It really is.
You have this highly respected judicial expert warning of the fatal consequences of political interference abroad, while back home, the very rules governing the lifespan of a judge's career are sparking massive allegations of political maneuvering.
It just illuminates the fragility of the rule of law. I mean, the law is just ink on paper unless the human beings interpreting it are actually insulated from coercion.
Absolutely. And speaking of structural manipulation, let's look at the transparency moves in the political sphere today, because the government made a definitive decision to keep politicians' asset and liability declarations entirely public.
Which is a vital mechanism for deterring corruption.
Yeah.
It allows the electorate, journalists, and civil society to track any unexplained wealth accumulation during a politician's tenure. It acts as a financial audit conducted by the public.
So it's a massive win for transparency on paper.
On paper, yeah.
However, it is immediately juxtaposed against the news today that members of parliament just had their salaries increased by 60,000 rupees.
Yeah, that optics problem is real.
Right. So the ledger is open for the public to read, but the taxpayer is actively funding the increase on that ledger during a period of immense national economic strain.
It creates a really complex situation for the state. You're simultaneously trying to prove financial integrity while actively increasing the cost of governance.
Yeah.
And this internal political timeline is also being squeezed by external geopolitical pressure right now.
Right, from India.
Yeah.
Indian Foreign Secretary Sri Vikram Misri just met with the president. And the diplomatic readouts show India is explicitly pushing for early provincial council elections in Sri Lanka.
Which is causing local political figures to draw lines in the sand.
Exactly. Local politician Tilvan has publicly argued that citing a lack of state funds is just an unacceptable excuse for delaying these elections.
Yeah.
So if we take a step back and look at this whole first segment, we have prisons fracturing, the police force undergoing forced modernization, the top investigative office in a political standoffs, and the rules of the judiciary being rewritten amidst protests.
The state's foundational infrastructure is in a state of high-velocity flux.
That's a great way to put it, which perfectly transitions us to the second massive pillar of our deep dive today.
The economy.
The economy. Because if the justice system and political framework determine the rules of the game, the economy is the scoreboard that tells you if those rules are actually working.
Right. And we need to examine how these high-level political maneuvers translate into the financial reality you experience every single day.
And when you look at the economic scoreboard today, the numbers are deeply, deeply contradictory.
They really are all over the place.
If you only look at the macro indicators, like the 30,000-foot view, it looks like an absolute boomtown. The all-share price index on the Colombo Stock Exchange surged for a second consecutive day.
Yeah, and it's not just the index moving up. The actual turnover hit a staggering 12.24 billion rupees.
12.24 billion. Let's unpack the mechanics of that, because that's huge, right?
It is. Turnover is arguably way more important than the index price itself.
Why is that?
Well, price tells you the perceived value, but turnover tells you the actual liquidity and the conviction in the market. A 12 billion rupee turnover means institutional money like heavy capital is moving off the sidelines and actively taking positions.
Wow.
It's just a really strong return of investor confidence, likely anticipating some favorable policy shifts or debt restructuring outcomes.
And that macro confidence is actually mirrored in the physical world by the tourism data today.
Yeah, the tourism numbers are massive,
Sri Lanka just crossed the threshold of welcoming 1.3 million international tourists.
which is huge.
The foreign exchange implications of that alone are massive. Plus, the country is officially climbing the global investor relations rankings.
Right.
So if you stop reading the news right there, you would assume the economy has fully recovered and is in a massive expansion phase.
But macroeconomics can be incredibly deceptive because it deals in aggregates.
Right.
An aggregate average hides the extremes. You have to look at the micro struggles, the legacy companies that actually form the backbone of domestic employment.
Like Hemus.
Exactly. Look at Hemus, an absolute titan of a legacy conglomerate. They just reported lower first quarter earnings.
And what was the specific mechanism they cited for that drag?
Intense cost pressure.
Intense cost pressures.
Yeah.
And if a giant like Hemus is struggling with cost pressures, what happens to companies without that level of capital buffering?
We have our answer today.
We do. Heel Apparel has officially filed for winding up after exhausting all their restructuring options.
Yeah, we need to explain the exact legal and financial mechanism of a company winding up.
Please do.
It basically means they have hit the absolute end of the runway. When a company attempts restructuring, they're negotiating with creditors to alter payment terms, or maybe swapping debt for equity, or liquidating non-essential assets just to stay afloat.
Right.
When Gila announces they have exhausted those options and are filing to wind up, it means the math just no longer works. The courts will step in, liquidate whatever assets remain, pay off secured creditors pennies on the rupee, and the equity is completely wiped out.
So it's the corporate equivalent of flatlining.
Exactly. It's a flat line.
I want to focus on why this is happening. How does a legacy apparel giant just flatline? My hypothesis is that we're looking at a two-tier economy.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, the tourism sector is booming because it imports foreign currency directly. But manufacturing and apparel rely on a massive, complex supply chain.
Very true.
They have to import raw materials, pay for energy to run the factories, and then export the finished product into a global market that is currently suppressing demand.
Your hypothesis is spot on. It's absolutely a bifurcated recovery. The tourism dollar stays relatively insulated within that hospitality ecosystem. But an apparel manufacturer is highly exposed to utility tariffs.
Right. Which brings us to the president's comments today on the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation's diesel loss.
Right, he noted they have the correct numbers, but an incomplete diagnosis.
What does that mean?
It means energy costs are the invisible anchor dragging down domestic manufacturing. If the cost of the diesel powering your generators and your transport fleets remains artificially high or volatile, your profit margins just vanish, regardless of how many orders you have.
And this liquidity crunch is trickling down to the most granular level of daily commerce. The reports today show a really worrying increase in the issuance of dishonored checks in business transactions.
That is the ultimate red flag for ground-level liquidity.
Yeah, let's trace the mechanics of a bounce check. Because it's not just one person losing money, it's a chain reaction.
Exactly. Say a retailer writes a check to a distributor for inventory, assuming their weekend sales will cover the amount by the time the check clears on Tuesday.
Okay.
But when the weekend sales fall flat because consumers have no disposable income, the check bounces.
Right.
Now the distributor can't pay the manufacturer can't pay their staff. It acts as a localized contagion, completely freezing the velocity of money in the local economy.
So we have a booming stock market at the top and bounce checks at the bottom. And to bridge that gap, international aid is basically still functioning as life support.
Yeah.
The Asian Development Bank just approved $200 million in emergency assistance for Sri Lanka. But mechanically, how does a $200 million injection actually work? Does it build a bridge, or does it just pay off an old credit card?
Emergency assistance of this type is usually directed at balance of payments support or budget stabilization.
So paying off the credit card.
Essentially, yeah. It isn't necessarily building a new highway. It's providing the central bank with the foreign reserves necessary to maintain currency stability and ensure the continuous import of essentials like medicine and fuel.
It prevents immediate systemic collapse.
Right. But you are completely correct to be cynical about the ledger. It's a sovereign debt injection. It buys time, but it fundamentally adds to the principle that future taxpayers are going to have to service.
Yet despite that debt load, global corporate entities are still betting on the geography.
They are.
We saw the launch of the global trucking giant Dongfeng in Sri Lanka today, in partnership with Euro Motors. We also have the Sri Lanka Skills Expo 2025, heavily championing a transition to a future-ready workforce.
Yeah.
And on the corporate leadership front, Budi Wickramanayake just won Employee of the Year at the Capital Maharaja Group Convention. So there's a tangible segment of the population that is aggressively building for a modernized future.
And that future requires a physical foundation. You can't scale a digital or service economy if the physical movement of labor and energy is bottlenecked.
Let's talk about those bottlenecks and the transit upgrades trying to fix them. The Sri Lanka Transport Board, the SLTB, is soon introducing a card payment system for bus travel.
Right, a move toward a cashless transit grid.
Which sounds great, but I was reading the public feedback on this, and the citizens are ruthlessly practical. They're essentially asking, it's great that I can tap a digital card, but are you going to fix the broken axles and the exhaust fumes pouring into the cabin?
It's a completely valid critique of surface-level modernization. Implementing a digital payment gateway increases revenue capture for the state by eliminating cash leakage, but it does absolutely nothing to improve the physical efficiency or safety of the rolling stock. It's a fiscal upgrade, not a transit upgrade.
However, we are seeing some behavioral incentives being introduced. Lanka Metro Transit just launched a new Metro Weekend Pass offering unlimited rides.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that isn't just about moving people. It's a mechanism to stimulate the weekend retail and hospitality economy by lowering the barrier to entry for domestic travel.
Precisely. Lowering friction increases economic velocity, and there is an even bigger infrastructure mechanism being upgraded beneath our feet right now.
The Power Cable Project.
Yes, the $52 million AIIB-funded Power Cable Project has officially broken ground. This is a 16-kilometer underground transmission system running from the Kerawalapita Power Hub directly to the Colombo port.
Okay, I want to understand the physics and economics of this. Why spend $52 million to bury a cable when you can string it on towers for a fraction of the cost?
3 main reasons: resilience, efficiency, and real estate.
Walk me through them.
Well, overhead lines in a tropical coastal environment are highly vulnerable. You've got monsoon weather, fallen trees, lightning strikes. Burying the high-voltage transmission lines practically eliminates weather-related outages.
Which ensures the Colombo port, the economic heart of the country, has uninterrupted power.
Exactly. Secondly, underground cables suffer less line loss over distance. And thirdly, in a densely populated urban corridor, the right-of-way for massive steel transmission towers is incredibly expensive.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, and it disrupts commercial development. Putting it underground frees up the surface for economic use.
That's a huge foundational upgrade. Moving to aviation, we're seeing international connectivity physically return. Qatar Airways is officially resuming flights to Bahrain, Kuwait, and Erbil.
That's good news for connectivity.
It is. But the ability of a local citizen to actually utilize that connectivity is a different story. The Sri Lankan passport is currently ranked 94th in the world.
Yeah, passport rankings are a really quantifiable metric of geopolitical leverage. Being ranked 94th means severe restrictions on visa-free access.
Mechanically, what does that mean for an individual?
It means a local entrepreneur trying to close a deal in Europe or a researcher trying to attend a conference in North America has to spend weeks and significant capital navigating bureaucratic friction that a citizen with a top 10 passport completely bypasses.
It's an invisible tax on global integration.
Exactly. It's an invisible tax.
And speaking of bureaucratic friction, it seems local authorities are finally recognizing how damaging it is. The Colombo Municipal Council has officially extended the deadline for business trade licenses to August 31st, giving small businesses some much-needed breathing room.
Which they desperately need.
Plus, there's a highly circulated opinion piece today arguing for the absolute necessity of customer-friendly hotlines across state and corporate sectors. The public tolerance for unnavigable bureaucracy is just dropping rapidly.
Because citizens recognize that their time is a finite economic resource. But, to truly measure the quality of life, we have to move out of the macroeconomy and the infrastructure grid.
Right.
We need to look at the immediate physical environment, the kitchen, the pharmacy, the street. How is the ground reality holding up today?
Let's transition to those ground realities because this is where the policy meets the pavement. Starting with the baseline cost of living, we actually have some highly stabilizing news for the household budget today.
Finally, some stability.
Yeah. Both Litro gas and LAU GFS Gas have officially announced they are keeping LP gas prices unchanged for the entire month of August. A 12.5 kilogram cylinder remains at 4,465 rupees, and the 5 kilogram stays at 1,792 rupees.
The mechanism of price stability in energy is psychologically massive.
I can imagine.
Over the past few years, energy prices have been violently volatile. It makes it impossible for a family or a small bakery to forecast their monthly expenses. When the state or the corporate duopoly can guarantee a fixed price for a 30-day window, it just removes a layer of existential financial anxiety.
We are also seeing the state mobilize heavily in the agricultural sector. The Paddy Marketing Board has purchased nearly 20,000 metric tons of paddy in just 3 weeks.
Wow, that's a lot.
Let's explain the mechanics of this, because the state buying rice isn't just about stocking pantries, it's a market intervention, right?
Exactly. When the harvest comes in, there's a sudden, massive supply of paddy. Normally, that would cause the market price to completely trash, which is devastating for the farmers.
Right.
By stepping in and purchasing 20,000 metric tons rapidly, the government acts as a buyer of last resort. It establishes a price floor, it guarantees the farmers a baseline income, and prevents private cartels from buying up the harvest at predatory low prices.
So food and energy are showing signs of structural stability. But the public health sector is currently facing a terrifying regulatory collapse today.
Yeah, the counterfeit drug bust.
Authorities have just raided and seized a warehouse containing over 100 different types of illegally imported unregistered medicines. And we aren't talking about counterfeit cough syrup here. These are highly sensitive treatments for cancer and heart disease, with a street value of over 10 million rupees.
The mechanics of a pharmaceutical black market are uniquely dangerous.
It's terrifying.
It is. When you buy a smuggled television, the worst-case scenario is it doesn't turn on. When you buy a smuggled oncology drug, you are introducing unknown chemical compounds into an immunocompromised system.
And it isn't just about whether the drug is fake. Even if the drug was manufactured legitimately in another country, the mechanism of transport is the killer, isn't it?
Precisely. Complex biologics and heart medications require a strict cold chain, meaning they must be kept at a highly regulated temperature from the factory line all the way to the patient's vein.
And smugglers aren't doing that.
No, smugglers do not use refrigerated, monitored shipping containers. They stuff these vials into hot cargo holds or non-ventilated warehouses. The chemical bonds degrade. So a patient pays a premium out of sheer desperation, thinking they're getting life-saving medicine, and instead they are injecting inert, degraded, or outright toxic compounds. A medical specialist went on record today stating that this proves drug regulation has effectively collapsed.
It is a total failure of the protective barrier. And the threats to public health aren't just coming across the border. They are breeding in our own backyards.
The dengue threat.
Yeah, the dengue threat is surging aggressively right now. Authorities are in a frantic rush to implement vector control measures before government and private schools end their third term tomorrow.
Right.
They've launched this massive media campaign called Mirror Missions, asking if the country can stop the next massive dengue wave.
What I find most revealing about that is the friction between the state's messaging and the public's reality.
Yeah, the public feedback has been harsh.
Exactly. The state launches a marketing campaign. But if you read the civic feedback, the public is pointing out the mechanical failure of the municipalities.
Sure.
You can't ask citizens to clear their flower pots while the municipal drainage systems are completely clogged with solid waste, creating miles of stagnant breeding grounds. Dengue control requires a synchronized mechanism between individual civic responsibility and heavy state infrastructure maintenance.
And when one fails, the mosquito population explodes logarithmically.
Exactly.
Navigating a single day right now feels like running a high-stakes obstacle course. Let me just map this out for you. You wake up and immediately have to audit your yard for dengue larvae.
Yeah.
Check the news to ensure the gas cartel didn't hike your cooking fuel overnight.
Yeah.
You have to double and triple check the serial numbers on your elderly parents' heart medication to make sure it isn't from the 10 million rupee contraband bust. And then you step outside and face the infrastructure failing in real time.
Such as the sudden 7-hour water cut hitting the Welawat and Pamankata areas tonight starting at 10 p.m.
Right, so you are frantically filling buckets. And if your livelihood depends on the ocean, the Fisheries and Aquatic Resources Department has just suspended all fishing operations in the Matara to Patuval Sea area because the maritime weather has turned violently rough.
The sheer friction of trying to exist right now is just exhausting.
And it even extends to the sky.
The kites.
The kites. The airport authorities had to issue a stern public warning today, urging people to keep their kites away from airport flight paths.
While it sounds like a trivial nuisance, the mechanics of aviation safety make it a critical threat.
Yeah, explain that.
Commercial jet engines are incredibly complex turbines designed to ingest highly compressed air. If a kite, which is constructed of rigid wooden dowels, nylon, and heavy string, is sucked into a turbine spinning at thousands of RPMs, it can shatter a fan blade.
Which is catastrophic.
Right. That imbalance can cause the engine to literally tear itself apart midair. The density of modern life means a simple leisure activity can now pose a catastrophic threat to a multi-million-dollar aircraft.
And that collision of modern technology and basic human behavior is happening on the roads, too. The police actually had to issue a formal warning to motorists today that watching videos while driving is incredibly dangerous.
Because people are doing it.
They specifically cited people watching cooking shows on their phones while behind the wheel. You were literally dodging a driver, learning how to temper spices while they're doing 60 kilometers an hour on the highway.
It highlights a complete breakdown in the basic mechanics of attention. We have engineered smartphones to be flawlessly addictive, capturing human attention at a neurological level.
Yeah.
But we haven't evolved our physical capability to multitask while operating heavy machinery.
Definitely not. Yet, amidst all this daily chaos, regulatory failure, and infrastructure friction, we're seeing some profound legal and cultural shifts toward empathy today.
Yeah, the new bills.
Parliament has officially passed the Animals Amendment Bill alongside the National Water Supply and Drainage Board Amendment Bill. I really want to focus on the animal welfare aspect because it is playing out in a highly specific, fascinating case today.
The Malab case.
Exactly. A woman in Malab is currently receiving organized legal support after being severely harassed by her neighbors simply for feeding street dogs.
This represents a massive evolution in the legal framing of empathy in the country.
How so?
Historically, the law prioritized human convenience above all else. Feeding street animals was legally vulnerable. It could easily be prosecuted as creating a public nuisance or a health hazard.
Right.
By providing structured legal defense for this woman, society is testing a brand new mechanism. They are legally recognizing the inherent right to compassion and defining basic animal welfare as a protected civic action, not a criminal nuisance.
That's a beautiful shift. We are also seeing the state institutionalize protection for the most vulnerable humans.
Yeah.
The Women and Child Affairs Ministry has just deployed 5 dedicated officers to every single divisional secretariat division in the country, specifically to strengthen child welfare operations.
This is the critical difference between passing a law and building a mechanism.
Right, execution.
You can pass all the child protection laws you want, but without localized, trained personnel physically present in the districts to monitor, report, and actually intervene, the law is useless. Deploying 5 officers per division is basically building the actual vascular system for social work.
And the cultural pulse of the country remains incredibly resilient today. The media is highlighting these deeply moving individual stories of purpose.
Yeah, I saw those.
There's a feature on a young girl working as an embalmer, driven by a mission to ensure absolute dignity for women, even in death. There's a historical retrospective on a Buddhist monk who endured unspeakable torture, yet refused to abandon his political vision, and an editorial reflecting on the deep psychological lessons of peace that emerged during the Avarudu season.
These narratives act as the shock absorbers of a society. When the macroeconomy is volatile and the infrastructure is failing, these cultural and historical touchstones remind the population of their collective endurance.
It reinforces the social contract. It is exactly that cultural vibrancy that likely led to Colombo just being crowned the most happening city by a prominent travel writer. The local art scene is proving to be incredibly dynamic. We have major exhibitions currently running, like Apisari, Window to Another Reality, and massive theatrical productions like A Night at the Opera.
It's a busy scene.
And even the scientific community is pushing forward, having just completed a massive, comprehensive coral reef conservation survey to protect the marine ecosystem.
So the physical world, despite its immense friction, is highly active. But human existence is no longer confined to the physical world.
Not at all.
The rules, the economics, and the dangers we face are increasingly dictated by the digital realm and shifting international borders.
Which is the perfect transition to the fourth major pillar of our analysis today, the digital frontier and global geopolitics. Because the state is now realizing it has to police the internet with the same aggression it polices the physical streets. The Telecommunications Regulatory Commission of Sri Lanka, the TRCSL, has officially ordered all internet service providers to block access to 146 illegal online gambling websites.
Let's analyze the mechanics of this intervention, because online gambling operates in a highly destructive legal gray area.
How so?
Economically, it is a localized vacuum. It extracts capital directly from the pockets of citizens and funnels it to offshore servers, contributing zero tax revenue to the local economy while simultaneously generating massive downstream social costs.
In the form of addiction and bankruptcy.
Exactly.
But practically speaking, does blocking 146 websites actually work? I mean, anyone with a basic understanding of a VPN, a virtual private network, can bypass an ISP block in about 3 seconds. Are we just playing digital whack-a-mole?
Yes and no. You are correct that a technologically literate user can bypass DNS filtering or IP blocking instantly, but the mechanism of a ban isn't necessarily to stop the dedicated addict.
Who's it for then?
It is to introduce friction for the casual user. By forcing ISPs to block these domains, you prevent the casual teenagers scrolling on their phone from accidentally clicking a link and falling into the funnel.
Yeah.
It raises the barrier to entry just enough to protect the technologically uninitiated.
That makes perfect sense. It's about friction, not an impenetrable wall. And this local push for digital accountability is actually mirroring a massive precedent-setting legal earthquake happening in the global tech space today.
The Meta ruling.
Right. In the United States, a judge in New Mexico has just handed down a devastating ruling against Meta, fining them $567 million specifically for failing to warn the public about child safety risks inherent in their social media platforms.
This is a monumental shift in the legal mechanics of the internet. For 2 decades, tech giants have hidden behind the shield of being neutral platforms.
Their argument was always, we just build a digital highway. We are not responsible for the accidents that happen on it.
Right, exactly. But this $567 million ruling pierces that shield. The courts are now establishing a brand new mechanism of liability. If your proprietary algorithm actively promotes addictive or harmful content to a minor, you are no longer a neutral platform.
You're a publisher.
You are a publisher, and you are financially liable for the psychological damage your product causes.
And the technology is advancing far faster than the court system can even establish precedents. We have a fascinating feature today titled Innovators 26, looking at how artificial intelligence is not just arriving, but completely transforming the underlying mechanics of developing economies.
Yeah, it's shifting everything.
Local businesses are receiving urgent warnings to adapt their digital strategies because consumer behavior is fundamentally shifting. Instead of using traditional search engines to find websites, more and more Sri Lankans are turning directly to AI models to get synthesized answers.
Which is a terrifyingly efficient evolution, but it introduces a massive vulnerability into the collective intelligence of a society.
Because of how the AI works.
Let's look at the mechanism of a large language model. It does not think. It does not know facts. It uses probabilistic math to predict the most likely next word in a sentence based on its training data.
Exactly. I've been researching this a bit. When an AI confidently invents a fake fact, what the industry calls a hallucination, it isn't lying because it doesn't know what truth is.
Right.
It's just guessing the math incorrectly.
Yeah.
But if a population starts bypassing doctors, financial advisors, and journalists, and instead outsources their collective reasoning to a black box algorithm that hallucinates, we are walking blindly into a crisis of mass misinformation.
You are hitting on the core systemic risk. When society outsources its sense-making to an opaque algorithm, truth just becomes whatever the math dictates.
Yeah.
And if we zoom out from the digital risks, the geopolitical risks in the physical world are escalating to a boiling point right now.
The Middle East.
Yes. The world order is shifting, and the shockwaves are going to hit local shores very soon. Right now, Iran is executing a highly concerted diplomatic and military push with the Gulf states.
And they issued a warning.
Tehran has delivered an explicit, unavoidable warning. If any Gulf state allows Donald Trump or the U.S. military apparatus to utilize their airspace or military bases for operations against Iran, Tehran will retaliate by striking those Gulf states' oil facilities.
This is the definition of high-stakes deterrence. Iran knows it cannot match the U.S. military in a conventional war, so they are pivoting.
Right.
They are leveraging the economic vulnerability of the entire globe. They're essentially saying, if you attack us, we will burn down the gas station that powers the world. Now, map out the mechanics of that threat for me. If a missile hits a major oil refinery in the Gulf, how does that actually impact you tuning in from Colombo today?
The mechanism is brutal, and it's immediate. A strike on major Gulf energy infrastructure chokes the supply of global crude.
Okay.
The moment the supply drops, maritime insurance premiums for tankers operating in the region just skyrocket. The global per-barrel price of oil will spike exponentially overnight. For an energy-importing nation like Sri Lanka, the impact is devastating. The Ceylon Petroleum Corporation's current diesel losses would look like a rounding error.
So everything goes up.
Everything. The cost of fuel for the SLTB buses, the diesel running the factory generators, the aviation fuel for Qatar Airways, and those LP gas prices that were just stabilized. Every single price tag will surge. A geopolitical chess move in Tehran mechanically triggers runaway inflation in a local grocery store.
It is terrifyingly interconnected, and the political architectures around the globe are constantly adapting to this. We are seeing major shifts in electoral strategy today.
Prashant Kishore.
Exactly. Prashant Kishore, arguably one of India's most famous and influential backroom political strategists, the man who engineered massive electoral victories for others, is finally stepping out of the shadows and making his own electoral debut as a politician in India.
Kishore's transition is a fascinating test of political mechanics. He is attempting to prove whether the architect who designs the engine can actually drive the car in a high-speed race.
Which is very different.
Operating the machinery of a campaign behind the scenes is vastly different from holding the charisma and public accountability of a candidate on the stage.
Now, amidst all these heavy discussions of geopolitical oil threats, AI hallucinations, and constitutional crises, we have to look at the sky, because the oddities happening today are just staggering.
Yeah, the space news.
First up, a 4-ton, completely unregulated, wayward SpaceX rocket stage has just violently collided with the moon.
A 4-ton piece of human-made space debris physically impacting the lunar surface.
I am going to push back on the relevance of this, though. We have spent an hour dissecting prison riots, crumbling apparel empires, and the threat of global oil shocks. Does a piece of billionaire space trash hitting a dead rock 238,000 miles away actually matter to our listeners, or is this just science fiction trivia to fill a newspaper column?
It is absolutely not trivia. It is a blaring alarm regarding the mechanics of the orbital commons.
Okay, why?
You're right to question the immediate impact of a moon crash, but the moon isn't the issue. The issue is low Earth orbit. The fact that a private corporation like SpaceX can leave 4 tons of heavy metal hurtling through space without any regulatory oversight highlights the complete absence of global space governance. We rely on satellites for everything. GPS navigation for supply chains, timing signals for global financial transactions, basic telecommunications.
So if one hits a satellite,
If unregulated debris starts colliding in orbit, it triggers what is called the Kessler syndrome, a cascading chain reaction of high-speed shrapnel that destroys our entire satellite network. That moon crash is proof that the regulatory framework for space has completely failed.
okay, when you frame it as a threat to the global financial rating system, it suddenly becomes terrifyingly relevant.
Yeah, it really does.
Let's pivot to something slightly more uplifting, but equally gravity-defying. We have the story today of Betty. She is a 97-year-old woman who survived a severe stroke just last year in 2025.
Oh.
And today, she has officially broken the Guinness World Record for being the oldest female wing walker. She literally strapped herself to the upper wing of a biplane in mid-flight.
That is incredible.
And in other fantasy news, iconic prop dragon eggs used in the global television phenomenon Game of Thrones are currently heading to the auction block.
Betty's narrative is the ultimate mechanical defiance of limits. I mean, she is defying her neurological medical history, defying the actuarial tables of age, and physically defying gravity.
Which provides the absolute perfect transition to our final pillar of today's deep dive. Because if there is one global arena where human defiance, the testing of physical limits, and raw drama all converge into a shared language, it is the world of sports.
Absolutely.
And right now, local heroes are utilizing that arena to make massive global statements.
Sports function as the ultimate psychological unifier for a nation. It acts as a mirror for a country's internal ambitions and capabilities.
And Sri Lankan ambition is burning incredibly hot today. Ramesh Tharanga has officially climbed the mountain to become world #1 in his discipline.
Which is huge.
But it wasn't just the ranking that made headlines. It was the mechanism of his confidence.
Mhm.
He didn't just humbly accept the trophy. He looked at the press and made a definitive declaration. He stated, "Sri Lanka does not have an Olympic gold medal. I will bring that gold medal to Sri Lanka."
That specific phrasing is mechanically important. He isn't saying he hopes to win. He is assuming the burden of a national historical deficit.
Right.
Taking a nation's Olympic drought and converting that psychological weight into competitive fuel is what transitions an athlete from a mere participant into a generational icon.
The momentum is palpable across the board, too. The Sri Lanka women's cricket team has just delivered a commanding performance, defeating Pakistan by 6 wickets in their T20 International Series opener.
Yeah, great match.
Furthermore, Dialogue has just hosted a massive high-profile event explicitly honoring Sri Lanka's Commonwealth Games medal winners. The corporate sector is leaning in heavily.
Which is the necessary mechanism for sustainability. Athletic talent is organic, but consistent global dominance requires infrastructure. By celebrating and commercializing these victories, the corporate sector is building the financial pipeline required to fund the next generation of training camps and sports science.
Speaking of the intersection of sports and massive commercial entertainment, the Lanka Premier League, the LPL, is delivering peak drama right now.
Yeah.
We saw McDermott absolutely power the Colombo Caps into Qualifier 2 with a masterclass performance.
Yeah, that was amazing.
And then you have the sheer heroics from Mishra, who almost single-handedly steered the Jaffna Kings into the grand final. The Jaffna Kings look unstoppable right now. They hammered a colossal 221 runs to seal their 3rd consecutive victory. The only opponent that could stop the momentum was the weather, with rain unfortunately knocking Dambulla entirely out of the playoff picture.
The LPL serves a highly specific mechanism in the cricketing ecosystem. It acts as an aggressive proving ground.
How so?
By blending elite, high-pressure international talent with hungry local players, you accelerate the development curve. Look at the strategic developments. You have international veterans like Zahir securing new deals with Jaffna, bringing intellectual property to the dressing room.
Right.
And simultaneously, you have rising local stars like Patharaj achieving higher ranks and setting new baselines for their careers. It is an incubator for high-performance pressure.
And that expectation of high performance trickles all the way down to the foundational grassroots club level. In local club rugby today, the unbeaten Upcountry Lions put on a clinic to defeat the Seahawks. Over in domestic cricket, Tharushka and Yasiru delivered stellar performances to put BRC firmly on top of the standings.
The connective tissue from the local club ground to the world #1 ranking is thriving.
However, we cannot ignore the fact that the athletic triumphs on the field are entirely governed by the boardroom struggles off the field. The mechanics of sports administration are just as ruthless as the geopolitics we discussed earlier.
Oh, without a doubt.
Let's dissect those boardroom mechanics. Starting locally, at the governance level, Football Federation of Sri Lanka President Jaswar Umar has just been elected as the SAF Vice President.
Which is a big deal.
This is a crucial diplomatic victory, granting Sri Lanka a significantly stronger voting voice and influence over regional football development. But when we look at football governance on the global stage, we are witnessing a system teetering on the edge of open civil war.
The situation with international football governance is just a masterclass in monopoly mechanics and labor leverage.
Right. European football's 55 member associations, operating under the massive umbrella of UEFA, have issued an official, unprecedented threat. They're threatening to completely boycott future FIFA World Cups if FISA's radical plans to shake up the international calendar and expand tournaments are approved.
Yeah.
I need you to explain the mechanics of this threat, because a World Cup without Europe fundamentally breaks the economic model of the tournament, doesn't it?
It destroys it entirely. FIFA holds the monopoly on the World Cup, which generates billions in broadcasting rights and sponsorships. FIFA's mechanism for growth is expansion. More teams, more games, a more crowded calendar.
More money for them.
Exactly. But UEFA represents the richest, most powerful domestic leagues and the highest concentration of elite players. UEFA is looking at the physical mechanics of player exhaustion and the dilution of their own domestic broadcasting revenues.
Right.
This threat is UEFA utilizing their ultimate leverage, the labor of the players, and the market share of European fans to block FIFA's expansion. It is a high-stakes corporate standoff masked as a sporting dispute.
It echoes the exact sentiment of a widely read opinion piece published today, which argues passionately that politics is ruining the spirit of cricket. The fans want to see the mechanics of a cover drive, but the reality is the game is controlled by broadcasting monopolies and regional voting blocks.
And sometimes those global logistics force massive, unexpected compromises. For example, the news today confirming that Formula One will utilize Malaysia's Sepang circuit to actually host the F1 Bahrain Grand Prix.
Which is geographically absurd. You are hosting a Middle Eastern Grand Prix in Southeast Asia.
It proves that in the highest echelons of global sports, the physical venue is entirely secondary to the mechanics of the broadcasting schedule, television contracts, and geopolitical event hosting rights. The track is just a television studio.
But amidst all the billions of dollars, the broadcasting rights, and the geopolitical maneuvering, the sports world was hit with a brutal reality check today regarding the fragility of the athletes themselves.
Yeah, the lightning strike.
Tragically, a Thai footballer was killed instantly by a lightning strike during a match. The same freak weather event left a Malaysian player and 11 others severely injured on the pitch.
It is the most sobering mechanism of all. It is a stark reminder that despite the armor of global governments, state-of-the-art sports science, and billion-dollar valuations, the players are ultimately fragile biological entities, completely vulnerable to the raw, indifferent mechanics of the natural world.
So we really have to pull all these threads together. We have covered an incredibly dense, massive scope of human activity today.
We really have.
We mapped the granular physical friction of 7-hour water cuts in Welawat, the terrifying reality of contraband oncology medications, and the sheer danger of citizens watching cooking tutorials while driving. We scaled up to the macroeconomic mechanics of legacy apparel companies winding up while the stock market turns over 12 billion rupees.
Yeah.
We examined the state's foundational infrastructure buckling, from multiple simultaneous prison riots to a constitutional standoff over the retirement age of judges. We unpacked the digital threats of AI hallucinations, the geopolitical powder keg of Iranian oil threats, and the regulatory failure of a 4-ton SpaceX rocket smashing into the lunar surface.
When you look at the entire diagnostic landscape we've laid out, the central theme is an environment in violent transition. The legacy systems, whether it is colonial-era prison architecture, 20th century energy supply chains, traditional telecommunications regulations, or even the centralized governance of FIFA, are physically and administratively failing to contain the speed, density, and complexity of the new reality.
Which brings us back to our fundamental mission today. We promised to show you the mechanisms beneath the headlines. We spent the last hour dissecting systems that are desperately trying to assert control over rising chaos, the Telecommunications Authority trying to block gambling IP addresses, the state attempting to incarcerate its way out of a drug epidemic, politicians trying to manage the retirement clocks of judges, nations threatening to bomb oil fields to deter military action, and scientists trying to track unregulated space debris. Every single headline is essentially an architecture designed to build a better box to contain human unpredictability. But as we saw with the woman in Malawi bravely enduring neighborhood harassment simply to feed street dogs, or 97-year-old Betty defiantly strapping her post-stroke body to the wing of a flying airplane, human nature fundamentally resists containment. The human mechanism always looks for a way to break out of the box.
It always does.
So as you step out of this deep dive and go about your day-to-day, I want you to actively observe the rules and the systems you interface with. Look at the bureaucracies you navigate, the digital platforms you trust, and the social norms you obey.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, are these systems actually functioning to protect you and elevate your potential? Or have their mechanisms degraded to the point where they exist solely to maintain an obsolete order? And what happens to our society when protection and order no longer mean the exact same thing?
That's the question to leave with.
Thank you for joining RTV Global Network's Deep Dive. Keep questioning the diagnosis, look for the hidden mechanisms, and remember that staying deeply informed is the only way to successfully navigate a rapidly changing world.